Hello students, this video is designed to tell you a little bit about the third annual Toothpick Bridge competition in my class. It was held a few weeks ago at the end of the 2012-2013 school year, and the competition itself sort of represents the culmination of all 6 geometry projects that we do in my class. These projects are things that we do in addition to all the curriculum. These are projects we do outside of class, and they utilize a lot of math, and they also utilize a lot of sort of engineering concepts and design strategies and the ability to use your hands and actually build stuff. So what I'm going to do today is just going to kind of go through the competition, talk a little bit about this year's winners and compare them to last year's winners, give you some tips, and then show you some of the other projects we've been doing this year, show you a video and a ton of photos. So here we go. The goal of this competition is to design the strongest possible bridge that spans at least 9 inches using only round wooden toothpicks and white or wood glue. The strength of the bridge will be determined by testing how much weight it can hold before it breaks. The scoring is pretty simple. It's based off of this efficiency rating fraction that you see at the bottom, and the fraction is your score. This is what determines the most efficient or the best bridge. It's the weight that the bridge can hold divided by the weight of the bridge itself. So before any of the competitions start, we immediately begin by actually weighing each bridge, and after that we of course test them, and then we just simply divide the two numbers. And you'll see in a few minutes that it's not always, the winner of this competition is not always the group or the bridge that holds the most weight. In fact, the last 2 years it hasn't been. A couple of guidelines and rules to follow. For my particular competition, in my class I require that each bridge must span at least 9 inches, and that's the gap that it actually traverses, which means, you know, the minimum I would probably build mine is 11 inches, so there's an inch on each side, so it doesn't fall through the hole. There's no height restriction on my bridges. Some different projects that I've seen online sort of limit your height so you can't make it too tall, but I don't have any such limitations. There are basically 2 types of toothpicks that you can find in a store, round and flat. I don't allow students to use the flat toothpicks. I require them to use the round ones. I do encourage students to trim off the ends of the round toothpicks just so they don't have pointy ends. You want to create a little bit more surface area so you can glue them together. In terms of the glue, you can only use white glue such as Elmer's or wood glue such as Type Bond. Some other glues that will get you disqualified are super glue, gorilla glue, crazy glue. All those glues are not allowed. In terms of, you know, painting or coating your bridge after it's done, I don't allow any of that stuff. You just submit your bridge as is and test it from there. And we set up this structure to load the bridge and to test them. And there's sort of a rigging and a platform, and we hang all of our weights from beneath the bridge at the middle, and to see if it either breaks or bends more than 2 inches. If either of those 2 things happen, then your bridge has failed. The champions this year in my 9th grade geometry class was a group, Taylor Slocum and Isaiah Baptiste. They had the most efficient bridge I've ever seen in any. I've done this for 3 years now. Their efficiency rating was 652, which means that their bridge basically held 652 times its own weight. And as you can see in the photo there, they are holding their trophy, and they each have medals as well. It was a really impressive bridge. I did not hold the most weight, but it was the most efficient, and I'll show you sort of the difference there in a moment. Second place team, Deja and Kiana, their efficiency rating was very impressive, about 570. Third place, Vanessa and Tyler, efficiency rating of over 511. Very, very impressive. I also awarded prizes to the coolest looking bridge. They each got a medal as well, Kristen and Rihanna. You can see their bridge right there. It's really, really a really great design. I was really, really impressed with that. So those 4 teams were the award winners. They all got medals, and the first place team also got trophies. Here are the results for every team that presented this year. You can see I broke my students up into groups of 2, and in this spreadsheet you can see the actual weight of the bridge, and these are all in pounds. So the winner, for example, their bridge actually weighed 0.14 pounds. The bridge load is how many pounds it held. The span is how wide it was. And the ER, of course, is how I judged each bridge. And it's worth noting right now that if you look in the load column, the bridge load column, the winning team held a little over 91 pounds. The 4th place team held the most, but they didn't win because their bridge weighed 0.2 pounds, whereas the actual winner had a much lighter bridge. You can see down in about 8th or 9th place there, the coolest looking bridge also held a lot of weight, Kristen and Rihanna, but their bridge weighed almost 0.4 pounds, almost 4/10 of a pound. So it's not all about how much you can hold, it's about how much your bridge weighs. Look at the 2nd place team. They held, their bridge load was about half of what the winner was, but their bridge was also about half the weight of the winner. So it's about efficiency. It's not necessarily about who can hold the most. And I'll actually show you some comparisons to last year's competition as well from 2012. The same thing happened. The champions from last year, right here we have Min, Meb, and Priyana. You can see that their bridge structure design was basically an isosceles triangle. It weighed about 1/4 pound and held an astonishing 151 pounds. Their efficiency rating last year was 581. So if we compare that efficiency rating to this year's, they would have come in 2nd place, but held about 60 more pounds than this year's champions. So again, when you build your bridge, be very, very sort of cognizant of how heavy you're making it. The more toothpicks, the more glue you use, the heavier it's going to be. And as you build it, you know, you're aiming for, look at most of the winners are under 2/10 of a pound. So when you weigh these things, you know, just keep that in mind. A lot of the people at the top have really light bridges, and if you go down towards the bottom of this screen, down here, starting here with Joy and Tiana, their bridge almost weighed 1/3 of a pound, and a lot of these bridges were really, really heavy and didn't hold very much, so their efficiency rating suffered as a result. This is from last year as well. You can see the winning team there had an efficiency rating of 581. The 2nd place team held 10 more pounds, but their bridge was quite a bit heavier. So it's all about efficiency. This was a video taken by one of our teachers this year at our competition. You'll notice that the rigging system has basically desks, 2 boxes, some platforms, some 4x4s, and then the bridge sits on top of there in between 2 adjustable 2x4s. And below that, held with cables and climbing rope, is a piece of plywood, and on that plywood holds our weights. This is our winning team, Taylor and Isaiah. You're going to see, it's a very short video, but it's the point at which the bridge breaks, and it's pretty enjoyable. Crowd's going crazy. It's a lot of fun. So here we go. So you can see right there, it fails pretty dramatically. That's usually a pretty good sign that your bridge is built well when it fails like that. when it sort of explodes rather than kind of bends or twists or anything like that, or leans over. Some other projects before we get into some more photos, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Toothpick Bridge competition, but some other projects we've done this year. All of our report periods, along with all the curriculum, have held a project as well. And report period 1 we started really basic with sort of just 2-point perspective, kind of learning how to utilize a ruler and follow some basic rules. Report period 2 was a little bit more complicated and certainly more geometric, where we actually created a large-scale tessellation over a giant poster. Report period 3 was where we really started to build stuff, and we built our geodesic dome out of cardstock. Report period 4 was a playing card polyhedron, which is very tricky. I'll show you photos of that in a moment. RP5 is when we started to ramp up and actually start to test how strong each project was, and we built structures out of manila folders, like little mini skyscrapers sort of, and we put weights on top until they broke or tipped over. And of course RP6, our culminating final project, was Toothpick Bridges. So here's an example of our report period 1 2-point perspective drawing. This was something I did on just a PowerPoint slide. I kind of put a horizon line in there, a couple of vanishing points, and put all my other lines in there and follow just some basic rules. This is sort of an example of what my students will do in report period 1. And you can see some of the other perspective there with the human figure in the foreground is much larger than the human figures as they sort of approach that vanishing point. Even though they're the same size person in real life, they appear much, much smaller. So that's RP1, pretty simple, good way to start the year. Then we move into a tessellation, where we take a regular, or not necessarily a regular polygon, but a polygon, and we sort of change the sides. In this case I just use a basic square. You don't have to use squares, you can use rectangles or triangles or really anything that sort of tessellates on its own. And we change the side. You can see that as I built this Pegasus looking thing, I sort of changed this, and I did this on a computer program as well. I changed this side and then I translated that down here. This is very geometric with translations, transformations and things. So when we translate things, we just slide them, so you can see that the horse head fits inside underneath its body. It's exactly the same. I copied and pasted it and just translated or slid it across the rectangle. Same thing with the front hoof. It goes out here and it goes in here, and then that figure tessellates or fills up an entire big poster with no gaps or overlaps over here to the right. Really fun geometric project, and it's one of those things that requires a lot of accuracy and precision. And we started to actually build stuff in RP3, our geodesic dome. You can see here it's made of basically 2 types of triangles, the yellow and the white. They're not the same in dimensions. They are slightly different, and my students are required to actually draw those and print it out on cardstock, cut them out, glue them all together in such a pattern, so it creates a geodesic dome. You can see a picture of all the projects this year. Really fun project. RP4 was the polyhedron made of simple cards. I think it's about 60 playing cards, if I'm not mistaken, and they all sort of fit together with no glue or anything. You just got to cut them the right way and fit them together. Really challenging, but very geometric and precision-based project. RP5, we moved down into the weight room, and we put weights on top of our folder structures. Each team is given 10 manila folders and a single bottle of white glue. And your job is to simply create a little structure that is strong enough to hold tons and tons of weight. I think this year the winner held over 500 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. So it's pretty exciting project. A lot of students really enjoy this one because it actually, you're putting weights on top, you're balancing them, you're figuring out how strong you can put together simple folders, file folders, into very, very strong and rigid structures that hold a ton of weight. And then of course RP6 brought the Toothpick Bridge competition. So what I'm going to do now is just go through and show you bunch of photos, just go through a slideshow for you. And in the description of this photo, I'll also put a link to the website where you can find all of these photos and the ones from last year, and you can download them and save them to your computer. So here we go. And that's about it. So I look forward to seeing what my future students can do, and I'll talk to you in the next video.